Hello, welcome back to the True Crime Guys podcast. I'm Lauren.
And I'm Michael.
Oh, baby, you guys ready for a case that we probably should have done a long time ago, one that's been suggested before?
Long overdue.
But I don't know. I was into it this week.
And that's what matters. As long as Lauren's into it, we'll do it.
That's right.
That's right.
So we're doing Old Herb. Old Herb. We're going to talk some topics that we've never really gotten into. A bit of a urine fetish, some autoerotic asphyxiation.
Uh-oh. Okay.
We've lost some great people to that, unfortunately.
Yeah,
that's a road that I'm afraid to go down. I will never choke myself during any masturbation or sex. That is my promise to you guys.
Well, thank you, Lauren. Thank you.
I'm just afraid if whether I'll like it, because if I like it, then there's no going back from there.
Right. Well, people that like it assume, I think, that everyone will like it. I think it's just whether or not you're willing to take that risk. I think taking that risk is part of the excitement. Right, but it's
because you got to take it a little further each time. You got to be on the verge of passing out, and then it's one of those times you go a little too far. I've been choked out enough in jiu-jitsu. I don't need to add it into my my sex life as well.
Well, it seems like
it might get a little weird when I do jiu-jitsu as well.
Right.
Like,
you might start liking it too much.
I'm getting hard on right now when I'm getting choked. This is not cool.
It's like, damn, Lauren's not even trying to win anymore. It's like, what the fuck? Lauren, tap out. Tap out. Is he smiling?
Right. Oh, man, I didn't expect this conversation to go this way. But if you're not intrigued by this episode thus far, even if you've heard about old Herb Baumeister, you haven't heard us do a take on it. So let's get into this.
That's right, guys. Let's go.
I said to my son, they're going to hit that raccoon with a spray gun, and sure enough, they just striped right over its face and neck. Didn't even move it, no effort to, get it out of the way. So I happened to have a Polaroid with me, so I took a shot of the thing. This was just, the painter should have had a chalk line drawn around his career by state officials. There was no excuse for that. The poor thing deserved a better fate than that.
Hey, speaking of disturbed, you should worry about your own backyard. Hey, goddamn, what nerve, always driving someone else's car. Hey, I'm just not sure about the mannequins at your bar. He said, get lonely down here. Yeah, it's kind of weird. And they keep me company. But what are they doing here? He said, get lonely down here. But it's kind of weird. And they keep me company. But why are they here? He said, get lonely down here. But they're not real. They keep me company. What the hell, man? These things can't be. These things can't be. They keep me company. Alright.
All right, our case this week is a fairly big name in the true crime world and fits the mold of cases that we did a lot of early on. A gay serial killer working in the 80s and into the early 90s.
Right.
Herbert Baumeister. And I also had the double life thing going on here,
Oh, yeah.
which I think was common for gay serial killers back then. You have to wonder how much of society created these men,
I was just about to say, I think the double life thing, you didn't even have to be a serial killer. It just, if you were a gay man in this area, in this time, you were living somewhat of a double life, whether you were committing a crime or
Even
not.
more so Herb because of where he grew up.
Yeah.
With the Bible Belt, as opposed to some of the Randy Kraft and those guys. California was much more accepting, even in the 70s and 80s, of a gay lifestyle than in the Bible Belt, which is still not necessarily that great to be gay and live in, I would say.
I agree. Indiana is one of those weird states. Like, they're not really a southern state, but they still kind of have a lot of those same convictions. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Up there, they're very conservative.
Very conservative lifestyle.
Yeah.
But Herb Baumeister, on the surface, he was a straight-laced business-owning family man living on basically a mansion in an 18-acre estate during his crime spree called Fox Hollow Farms. What is it with Fox? Like Fox Farm?
Yeah, like Fox
also, yeah, dude. Like I couldn't help but think about DuPont as well because of Team Foxca, and there was some similarities in their personality as well.
Indeed.
And they're physical attributes. They were both tall, lanky, kind of gangly dudes living on a fox farm.
Yeah.
One was Foxcatcher, the other being Fox Hollow Farms, but very, very similar.
Very similar, very eerie. And there's a lot of supernatural shit associated with Fox Hollow Farms. Maybe we'll dive into that on another time. I'm thinking about doing an episode on Strange and Unexplained about that to kind of supplement this episode. So
I was unaware of that, but I did briefly watch a little bit of a YouTube video before we started this.
Yeah.
And it looked like there was a group of people that were in the dark inside the mansion, and they were going to go exploring. Is there some sort of a supernatural element to it?
there is. Actually, I swear to God, I felt like I found more about the supernatural element in looking for info on Herb than I actually found on Herb. But yeah, there's all types of ghost sightings and different supernatural things that are associated with Fox Hollow Farms. So I think it would be a fun thing to dive into. And of course, it's in relation to Herb's horrible crimes that happened there.
Well, yeah,
So
of course. I mean,
yeah.
if you believe in supernatural, if you believe in ghosts and things, this place would definitely be haunted
God.
because there were skeletons all over the forest surrounding his large home.
Yes. And a lot of these men that were killed on this property were very young, just starting out in life. So if you believe, ghosts stick around because they have unfinished business in their life, these guys
Yeah, no
probably
doubt.
had a lot. I mean,
Yeah,
seriously.
and several of them have not been identified as well. So maybe that's a part of their unfinished business.
Yeah, indeed.
So yeah, I didn't get into much of the supernatural stuff because I didn't do a ton of looking around the internet. I got a book,
Yeah.
and studied a few articles. But the book I got was called "The Double Life of a Serial Murderer: The Life of Serial Killer Herb Baumeister" by Jack Smith.
Nice.
It was a good, quick read. It was a little over 2 hours on Audible.
Okay.
So I got the audio version of it.
And it was mainly just
And
straightforward.
it got straight to the point.
Yeah.
Yeah, it got straight to the point. Not a lot of fluff, just all the gritty details that you need.
Right. Like a Jack Rosewood or a Philip Carlo novel.
Yeah.
Right to the point.
Yeah,
I like it.
that's great for studying for a show like this.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it is.
Because I'll add the fluff. We'll add the jokes and all that stuff, but I just need the details.
That's right.
So Herbert Richard Baumeister was born on April 7th, 1947, and shares a birthday with Jackie Chan and Russell Crowe.
No freaking way.
This page of we've talked about it before, but the birthday thing, when you pull up the pages of famous birthdays.
Yeah.
The fact that there was some lady from TikTok or YouTube that was ahead of Jackie Chan, I just wanted to punch my screen. I was like, I've never heard of this person, and you can't tell me more people know who this is than Jackie Chan. You got to be fucking kidding
Well,
me.
maybe nowadays, it's relevancy. You got to stay
guess.
relevant. When's the last time
I'm just the old guy. Get off my lawn.
I know. When's the last time you seen Jackie Chan in something though? Man, what is he
It's been
up
a while,
to
but
now?
also Russell Crowe too. I don't know.
Yeah, both of them. Both of them.
They were both down the list underneath a bunch of TikTok and YouTube people.
Yeah, definitely legendary A-list actors, both of them. Yeah.
Jackie Chan was the man in the 90s.
God,
dude.
I love
He
Jackie
did all his
Chan
own
movies.
stunts,
Loved it.
right? And he did all of his own stunts. I mean, the guy would do 50 takes if it took, if that's what it took to do some crazy
Yeah.
jump off of 2 walls and land up on the top.
Oh,
and
I
shit.
know. I love the way he fought with shit around the room. It was just so fun.
Yeah.
He would put some guy's arm in a ladder and then twist the ladder and break it or some shit. Just
Yeah,
I
and
love
he was
that
more
stuff.
than just an action person too. He was very charismatic. Could have been
Yeah.
successful in other avenues of film as well.
No doubt, no doubt. Even not in action movies, he could have been a
Yeah.
really cool detective or a private eye.
Obviously, very good in comedy as well.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Freaking Rush Hour, one of the classics.
Dude, seriously, underrated. Rush Hour. I want to watch that again.
I know, right?
Where is this coming out of my mouth? Love Rush Hour, man. The chemistry between those two. Who saw that coming? They're fucking amazing together.
Moving on. So he was born in 1947. His father was an anesthesiologist and his mother was a homemaker. Herb was the oldest of 4 children, and he, by all accounts, had a normal, fairly uneventful childhood until he started getting into his hormonal teenage years, and then there was some definitely big red flags,
Okay.
I would say.
Yeah.
When he reached his teens, things changed. His behavior became increasingly bizarre and erratic. He became antisocial and withdrew from being with friends and family. He did have a close friend that gave us some insight into the weirdness of young Herb that kind of reminded me a bit of Jeffrey Dahmer. This close friend that he had, keep in mind, they were in grade school at this time, and says that Herb used to ponder what it would be like to taste human urine. Not the most common. I mean, look, we do some weird stuff when we're young teenagers, but that's not something I've ever pondered. I'm sure you haven't either.
Not that I can think of. Now, I have thought about it in like a life or death situation. You know, I'm like,
Well,
oh
yeah, of
man,
course.
what if I was out? You know, would I be able to drink my urine? How often can you drink your urine? How many times? I've thought about that type of thing in a survival situation, but never for pleasure. No, I don't think I want to drink urine for pleasure.
And I've never. The difference is as well. Like I think some of us, like you said, have pondered what it'd be like to drink our own urine in a survival situation. He was pondering what it was like to drink someone else's urine. It's definitely. I've never considered that.
Nope.
And also, much like Jeffrey Dahmer, he was obsessed with decay and death. He once picked up a dead bird, I think it was a crow, on his way to school. Like, was just giddy. He saw this dead crow and just ran over, picked it up, stuffed it in his pocket on his way to school, where he then proceeded to leave it on his teacher's desk. So a bit of a prankster as well. It's just common with serial killers, isn't it?
Yeah.
Doesn't it seem like a lot of them are prank? Also, Dahmer was like as well.
Yeah, they want to get a shock out of somebody. You know, that's something that is instilled in them at a young age. They want to do things that shock other people. Mm-hmm. Yeah, they get off on that.
Very true. Another time he was reported to have been caught urinating on a teacher's desk, which is
here we go with the urine.
Hilarious because he also does it to his boss later on. He gets fired from the Bureau of Motor Vehicles for doing the same fucking thing.
Yes. It's like, wow, you've been doing this for a long time. And these are just two examples. You know, if he did it once when he was a kid and once still as an adult, if that's still what's coming to your mind.
Oh, he's pissing all over everything.
He's pissing everywhere
in life.
Oh, yeah, this guy's probably like pissing in plants in the corner of his office and shit. No, this is just weird.
Something was clearly wrong. He started attending high school at North Central High and was active in biology, geology, government, international relations, and chess clubs. Several sources mention her being taken and being evaluated by mental health experts as a teen. His father was very concerned with him about his oldest son.
Right.
Basically throughout his life, his father knew something was wrong. He took him to get evaluated. You wonder how much of this is the fact that his father was worried about his sexuality, and were there signs that his son was gay and he was trying to figure out what was wrong with him. Maybe I wonder about that.
That could be
because that's very common back in these days.
Yes, it is. Shit, I know families now, more recent, who thought that they had mentally ill kids growing up or kids that had some type of issues, and it turned out they were just homosexual.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, it's pretty crazy, especially in like you say, in the Bible Belt. That plays a lot into it. It really does.
Yeah. And he's growing up through the 50s and 60s.
Exactly. It's a tough time.
So these sources mention him being diagnosed with schizophrenia when he was a teenager and not receiving any further treatment. However, that wasn't in the book. I've seen it several places, including Wikipedia. I'm not sure how much truth there is to that. I know that he later is taken in by his father to get help, but that was after he'd gotten married in his early 20s.
Right.
So take it with a grain of salt.
Well,
I did hear that.
It's not hard to accept that, though, as information. I mean, mental health wasn't deemed important. You know what I mean? Even a diagnosis like schizophrenia is probably like, oh, they just blamed it on him being a teenager. He'll grow out of it. It's just a lot of hormonal things going on right now. He'll grow out of it. It'll be fine. I could see that.
Right.
But it is odd that it wasn't in the book. That seems like a very important fact to have in your book. Maybe they just couldn't confirm it.
Right.
Yeah.
And it could have also been one of those things we've talked about in the past where, one source mentions something like that.
Yeah.
Maybe it's not true, and then everybody else just kind of copy and pastes onto their shit too.
Oh, yeah. That shit can get blown up.
The book seemed to be very well researched. There was a lot of stuff in this book that, they had direct, they talked about his time at the later stint he does in a mental institution, and they talked about exact dates and the actual location, whereas I just heard every other source just said, oh, as a teenager his father took him to get help and he was diagnosed with schizophrenia. No mentions of a time period or actual location of where this went down.
Okay.
So okay. I'm gonna side with the book mainly. That's why I thought it was worth mentioning, because most sources say that, but
right.
It wasn't in the book.
Now, it is also important to remember that his dad may be more in tune to this than other people, because he was in the medical field. He was an anesthesiologist. So maybe his dad was a little more in tune to mental health and just health in general. So maybe he was showing concern this early for his son.
Yeah. So minus this, kind of weirdness and stuff, he would ultimately graduate from high school in 1965, and began attending Indiana University, which is actually pretty prestigious school.
Yeah, still is.
Yeah, and while at IU, he met his future wife, Juliana Sater, during his freshman year, and they would be inseparable for many years to come after that. They reportedly shared strong conservative views and were drawn to each other. Juliana and Herb would eventually marry in 1971 when he was 24 years old.
Okay, pretty typical.
Their relationship was a bit of a facade. It was more of a cover for him to hide his homosexuality, in my opinion. It was like, this is what you do,
Yeah, that seemed pretty obvious to me as well. He was definitely feeling the pressure to be normal at this time.
Yes. Briefly after the wedding, though, we see some signs that, all is not right with Herb still. On the surface, things look fine, but he's not doing well. After the wedding, he had become despondent and spent a week on the couch frequently crying. And this is when his father, according to the book, checked him into a mental facility. And that was LaRue Carter Medical Facility, which has a checkered past, if you look into it.
Yeah.
A lot of history of abusing their patients and things like that. However, Herb never mentioned anything happening along those lines while he was there. But he hid a lot of stuff in his memory bank, in his skeleton closet, if you will.
Yes, he did.
So who knows? Maybe something did happen to him there. But he spent a few months there, and his wife stayed by his side, frequently visiting him, and was fully supportive of him throughout several instances in his life where he, has breakdowns or has bizarre behavior, getting later fired from the Bureau of Motor Vehicles for peeing on his boss's desk. She stands by him for a long time through a lot of stuff.
Yeah, she's a trooper, no doubt.
Yeah. While at LaRue Carter, he would be diagnosed with compulsive disorder, which is kind of a catch-all term for general depression or mental illness at the time.
Yeah.
Like we said, they're still trying to figure out mental illness through these times.
I feel like by definition, and especially in the 60s, you could probably give every single serial killer or repeat criminal compulsive disorder. I think it's just, like you say, it's just such a broad term that you're just throwing out there.
Yeah.
Like they have no impulse control. They're just compulsive. They act, and then they're a completely different person. I think they saw that as schizophrenia when he's really just a sociopath.
Right. I agree. So Julie and Herb briefly rented an apartment, but after they both became gainfully employed, they moved up to a moderate home in Indy's 72nd Street. Julie had received her bachelor's degree in education science and was working as a teacher at Broad River High School. Herb, meanwhile, was never able to finish college. He tried several times and just didn't have the drive or the focus during this time to complete his education. And so after several attempts at that and failing, he settled for a job at the BMV, the Bureau of Motor Vehicles. We call it the DMV now, I feel like, most of the time. But
I think it depends on your state. See, we call it the DMV here in North Carolina too. But apparently, I looked this up, and it's apparently still in a lot of places in the Midwest and Indiana in particular, they call it the Bureau.
Okay.
Instead of the district.
Makes sense. I mean, because it is a government entity, right? I mean,
yeah.
Bureau sounds more like governmental than Department of Motor Vehicles does.
Yeah, I guess it does. Department seems very dumbed down.
Yeah, he became a clerk, but slowly began working his way up the ladder, eventually earning the title program director. Meanwhile, the couple's first child came in 1979 with the birth of their daughter that they named Marie. And in the following years, they would have Eric in 1981 and Emily in 1984, which is an unbelievable success rate considering Julie would later claim that after 25 years of marriage, they'd only had sex 5 to 6 times by her estimation.
Whoa.
And she also said that she had never even seen Herb naked.
Oh, my
that he always
God.
changed in the bathroom into his pajamas. And I'm guessing they had sex in the dark with the covers on.
He was
Maybe even a hole in the sheets.
Oh, Jesus.
I don't know.
He was always wearing those blue jean shorts like Tobias on Arrested Development. You ever watch that show?
Right. No,
Oh
I
my
didn't,
God.
but-
David Cross plays this character who never is seen naked. And so even under his clothes, he wears these cut off blue jean shorts that fit super skin tight. And it's that's like his underwear that he never takes off, never takes them off.
That's hilarious.
I just imagined that as soon as I heard about her. That is so
But yeah,
weird.
I mean, what a success rate though to have 3 kids after only having sex 5 to 6 times.
That's an average of sex
That's like
once
over 50%.
every 5 years. Do you realize that?
That's crazy.
That's insane.
Oh, as far as having sex.
Yeah. Are those kids even
Yeah.
his? Man.
I don't know,
I feel
man.
like that's a legit question.
Yeah.
Wow. When I told my wife that statistic when I was sitting at the table reading over this timeline this morning, and I was like, listen to this. She was like, those kids probably aren't his. I was like, you think? I was like, wow, I didn't even think about that.
So maybe the milkman. I don't know.
Who knows? Who knows? That's crazy.
So these early years of marriage seemed to be going well for her, but by all outward appearances, he was successfully keeping his true desires buried deep. However, then he lost his longstanding job at the BMV. He'd been there for, I think 6 years or something at this point. However, he became quite fond of his younger coworkers and commonly hung out with them at parties at one of the underlings' rural properties on weekends. So
that's just weird.
He was kind of the boss, and he was hanging out with a lot of his coworkers who were beneath him in the chain and drinking with them. And they would go to some farmhouse. And at one of these parties, Herb became heavily intoxicated and at one point grabbed one of his coworkers' keys, a guy named Gregory Moe, and proceeded to drive all over the countryside hammered. During the drive, he ended up having a minor accident with another vehicle, at which point, surprising his coworkers, fled from the scene, speeding away and telling them not to say anything.
Oh my God.
Obviously, this wouldn't have boded well, him getting into a drunk accident with his coworkers. He probably would have lost his job.
Yeah, definitely.
Right then. So the next day, Herb would go to Moe's place and take his car again.
Oh my God.
Moe assumed that, Herb was going to be taking his car to get fixed,
Right.
He did not do that. 3 days would go by, and Herb had not contacted Moe. Moe hadn't heard from him, so he reported the vehicle stolen at that point.
Do you think he, looking back in hindsight, do you think he used his car to commit a crime? Probably, right?
Dude, I did not even consider that. But, there's so many different reports of vehicles from the witnesses that saw Herb leave. There's the victims that left these gay clubs that Herb would kill a lot of times.
Yeah.
It seemed like there was different vehicles that were reported. It wasn't always the same car.
And different tags. Sometimes he had Ohio tags and from different states.
That's I bet he did, dude. I bet he killed at least one person with that car over those 3 days.
He took the car at the party to see what Moe would do. And since Moe didn't freak out, he was like, okay, well, fine. I'll borrow his car again the next day. But this is just so weird, man. I don't know. I've never wanted to hang out with my bosses in any job I've ever had. Like when we've had like parties and extra shit, I'm just like, I don't know. It's just weird to me to go hang out with my boss somewhere outside of work. That relationship always it doesn't end well because one ends up taking advantage of the other, typically. It's like if you become friends, either your boss takes advantage of you and calls you in when he has nobody else, or the other way around. That employee becomes really close with the boss, and now they can slack off and do less work and be held less responsible at work because they're friends with the boss. I feel like either way, those relationships just don't work. And this is like the worst example or the best example of it not working, in my opinion.
This is not your typical example,
but this is worst case scenario, hanging out with your boss.
But that's such a good point, man, that the book didn't even think to bring up, is that car was probably used to
3 days time. That's plenty of time to go use it, pick up somebody, clean it, bring it back.
Because, it is believed, and I believe 100% that Herb Baumeister, we're going to talk about this a lot later, is the I-70 killer, or at least he played a large role in those. I think it could have been multiple people. Yeah. There was other serial killers working the area at the time. But it sure seems to fit the mold of Herb.
Yeah, it does.
And he lived in that area, and prior to him having Fox Hollow Farms, he didn't have such a convenient place to dump the bodies when he was living at his normal house in town,
right, in
Indianapolis, not in this big rural property.
If he's not the I-70 killer, he done a large part of the I-70 killings.
And that's my opinion. And this would fit in that time period.
Yes. It fits very well because
when those bodies were being dumped.
Right. And we'll talk about that more later, about around the time he buys his new property.
Yeah. So he takes his coworker's car, Gregory Moe, who he had wrecked the car the night before. He takes it for 3 days and ditches it somewhere. I don't know. He may have burned it or whatever, but Moe would end up reporting the car stolen and get actually a payout from the insurance company for the stolen car that never turned up. But over the coming months, Gregory and his other coworkers would come clean to the Bureau of Motor Vehicles about what had happened that night, and Herb would actually get arrested for this once the truth came out about it. He would be arrested for theft and conspiracy to commit theft. And For whatever reason, though, the same coworkers that had gotten him arrested ended up being uncooperative on the stand, and Herb would ultimately be found not guilty. So he'd get off the hook for the theft of that car.
Again, he's their boss, right? I mean, why would they want to go
And at this point, he was still employed by the Bureau of Motor Vehicles until not long after that when he urinates on his boss's desk.
Yeah, right. But before that, they really didn't want to go against their boss. You know, why would you want to? They don't want to leave their job. You still got to. You can't testify against him and then go work under him the next day.
Well, I mean, if they had, to be fair, if they'd testified against him and he would have gotten convicted for this, surely the Bureau would have fired him, right? And then he wouldn't be their boss anymore. That's the way I would have looked at it.
True. Maybe they liked him a little bit.
He'd be going to jail and then he'd be fired. And so, but whatever. Yeah, maybe they did like him.
Yeah, maybe they liked him.
Or were intimidated by him. I don't know. Maybe he got to them on the side and was like, you better not testify against me or else.
Right.
Who knows? But
yeah.
The final straw for the BMV was after Herb was accused of urinating on his boss's desk after the boss had left for the day.
Oh my God.
Herb had gone in and seen a letter sitting on the center of his boss's desk that was assigned, or it was basically set to be delivered to the governor of Indiana, and
but it wasn't.
He just couldn't help himself and pissed right on that letter on his boss's desk.
Was the letter about him? Was the letter about Herb?
No. He had a bone to pick either with the governor of Indiana or with his boss or both.
I just don't see how that's the first thing that comes to your mind. You know, I mean, I don't know why you don't just grab it and rip it up and throw it in the trash. Why are you going to piss on it? Like, I just don't.
Also, what does it say about Herb that everybody just immediately knew it was him that had done it and fired him over it? Like, they didn't have video evidence. This is like prior to the surveillance being everywhere.
Yeah, they knew immediately who pissed on the desk. Yeah, they're like, oh yeah, Herb pisses on everything. It's definitely Herb.
Right. Yeah, so he would be fired from the Bureau of Motor Vehicles, which would ultimately turn out to be the best thing that could have happened to Herb financially, because his next venture would turn out to be much more fruitful. He wound up working for a thrift shop following his firing from the BMV, and soon realized the potential available in a place like that. He and Julie talked it over, and based on Herb's acquired knowledge of running such an outlet, so he worked for this thrift store for 3 years, and was like, I can do this. I can own one of these, and decided with the help of his mother, which when you look at a lot of articles, it's like he was a successful businessman that opened this chain of department stores.
Yeah, was he though?
Wildly successful, and it's like he ripped off the idea and even the name from another successful chain of department stores. Yep. And he got a $350,000 loan from his mother in order to open the first one. So he didn't come up with the brilliant idea of save a lot.
Right.
He just took the E off save, because there was already the Save a Lot franchise, which is still around today.
Yeah, the grocery stores.
And has tons of them. Yeah, there's tons of them. That was there. That had been started in 1977, I believe. The original Save a Lot. He started one in 1988 called Save a Lot with no E on the save.
Yeah.
And opened 2 of these locations in East Indianapolis, and they actually were a raging success for a number of years because they were extremely clean, and he also had a good reputation for donating to local kids' charities and stuff.
Right, of course.
With Save a Lot, so people felt good to shop there, and the prices were very cheap. So people that were, not affluent, the kind of
right
people that were struggling financially were able to shop there.
I mean, and thrift stores, they're 100% profit, man. The CEO of Goodwill, don't look up how he lives. It'll make you pissed off. Like, don't look it up. It's crazy how much money these fucking thrift stores make.
Well, they get all the all the shit that they're selling donated.
Exactly.
So, I mean, it's all profit.
That's what I'm saying. And then $350,000 from his mom in 1988. Lord, what's that equivalent to now? $750,000 or something? It's got to be.
Now that was from the book, and then I've seen elsewhere that it was a much smaller amount of money that he used to start it. But it's not cheap to open a department store like from scratch.
No,
you know what I mean? I saw something like he took $5,000 and started it. I'm like, I don't think you would be able to start much with that, even in 1988.
No, not unless you just found a really cheap storefront that you could rent. But you would still have to have a collection of merchandise. You know what I mean? You can't just start a thrift store with nothing.
It's clear that his parents were very well off. I'll say that. It's clear that his parents were very well. His mother had a a home, a waterfront condo that they had just for like vacation. It was like their second home.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm going to lean with the book side on this one as well, getting a large loan from his mother to open the first location, which was a raging success. And he ended up opening another location in Indianapolis, and they were doing quite well.
Yeah.
And they had this sudden influx of cash. So the Baumeisters decided to upgrade their living situation. The next home they purchased was, by all intents and purposes, a mansion, and would later be the infamous site for the crimes that Herb would commit. Fox Hollow Farm, which was where they would move. I think it was like, was it like 90 miles north of Indianapolis or something? In a much
I think it was
more...
only 20 miles north. It was pretty close to
was
it.
it?
Yeah. Wasn't bad.
Oh, yeah, 20 miles north of Indianapolis. The home was a majestic 9,500 square foot Tudor-style building sitting on 16 acres of lush green pastures located in Westfield, Indiana, about 20 miles north of Indianapolis, which gave the young family privacy without being too far from the city. It was complete with a 5-car garage and an indoor swimming pool.
Jesus.
So quite a step up from the way they've been living before.
That is a mansion. Anybody that has an indoor swimming pool in 1988, that's incredible.
Yeah. And it was a shame that they bought this place because it was perfectly manicured and well kept prior. But after the Baumeisters moved in, it just fell apart. Like it was, all of the landscaping was overgrown, and the inside of the house was in shambles. Basically, it was just like shit stacked everywhere, boxes and all kind. They never really seemingly settled in and fully unpacked over the years.
Yeah.
Or that was just the way that they lived.
Yeah. Well, they had the money to afford the property, but maybe they didn't have the money or the time to maintain it. That's something a lot of people don't understand when they move into a bigger property. Like, just because you can afford it financially doesn't mean you can afford the upkeep or will have the time for the upkeep. If you can't afford someone ancillary
stuff around it is the utilities are going to be 5 times what what you're used to paying,
right.
And the maintenance of I had an acre property in Vegas. And just keeping up the weeds. When it would rain, our front yard was so massive that it would just be filled with weeds. And if you didn't get on it quick, I would end up spending like my entire Saturday pulling fucking weeds.
Yeah.
And I didn't have the money to pay a landscaping company to do that.
Right.
That's the thing, is like you just don't think about this kind of stuff.
And your yard was gravel, right? Wasn't it rock?
Yep.
And so that was just the weeds that were popping through.
Yep.
Yeah, it's a lot of maintenance. I don't think him and his family were prepared for that.
Yep. So, as we briefly mentioned a minute ago, Herb's mother had a lakefront condo about 80 miles north of where they lived, the Fox Hollow Farm.
Yeah.
And the family would make frequent vacation trips there. They agreed that when they bought this place that they weren't going to have as much, income for vacations and things like that. So they're like, we'll buy this massive house, which is like in a way a vacation in itself.
Right.
And then for our trips that we do want to make, we'll just go to Herb's mother's condo on the lakefront. And so they were making frequent trips. However, over time, Herb stopped going with the family. The family would do weekend trips and a lot of summer trips.
Yeah.
And Herb would stay behind, and his excuse was that he needed to maintain his 2 Save-A-Lot stores. But it was more, he wanted alone time to troll the gay bars and find victims, is what it ultimately was about.
Right. Yep.
So while the family was away over the course of these years, through the mid to late 80s to the early 90s, Herb would hang out at gay bars and lure young men back to his house, where many of them would never make it out. They would die at his hands. And so let's get into the investigations of police discovering, that these young gay men were popping up missing all over the place.
Right.
When the mother of 28-year-old Alan Broussard approached Virgil Vandegrift, who was a former sheriff that was then working as a private investigator. So in this case, we've seen him before. We have kind of a heroic private investigator who does what the police should be doing.
Right.
We've seen this before, and Virgil is the prime example of one of those guys. He's dedicated to discovering, who is killing these young gay men.
Yeah, Virgil's not the guy that's going to let it go. He's not going to let this go.
So, yeah. 28-year-old Alan Broussard approaches Virgil in early June of 1994 to tell him that her son was missing. And Vandegrift wasn't overly concerned initially. Most cases, he thought usually turn out to be runaways,
right?
With no foul play involved. He nonetheless began to investigate the case. Alan Broussard, he learned, had his share of troubles. So yeah, Alan's mother. I think I kind of screwed that up, but Alan's mother is the one that approached Virgil. Alan, her son, was missing.
Right.
And he would find out that Alan was a heavy drinker. He was involved in the gay community, and he was last seen, in fact, leaving a gay bar called Brothers. Virgil issued posters throughout the Indianapolis area and elsewhere that ran Alan's photo and asked for information from any citizen who might have seen him. And if Vandergrift first perceived no ill intent behind Alan's disappearance, his perception of what most likely did happen to the man changed quickly. Before the end of July, he became convinced that, as he puts it, Indianapolis had a serial killer on its hands because he noticed 3 similar incidents had occurred, and more would surely be around the corner if this perpetrator wasn't caught. So he basically noticed that Alan was not the only one that was missing, and
Right.
Alan was not coming. He hadn't popped up like he'd maybe initially assumed that it was just a mix-up. Alan was not to be heard from or seen, and there were several other young men just like Alan that were gone.
Yeah, way too close in description, frequented the same bars, the same places.
Yep.
Yeah, too close.
So Virgil learned that an Indianapolis police detective named Mary Wilson was working on the disappearance of other gay men throughout the area, all similar to the Broussard mystery. Even their physical appearances and ages paralleled. He also came to a small article in a magazine called Indiana Word about a man named Jeff Jones who had disappeared in mid-1993, a year earlier. And this was a gay lifestyle publication which Vandergrift's investigation picked up while scouting the gay bars for information on Broussard. And it reported that Jones, who was 31, had evaporated into thin air from the streets of Indianapolis. So multiple men, all in the same circle, living a similar lifestyle, are going up missing. And the latest would take place in July. This time, Roger Allen Goodlett, who was 34 years old, left his mother's house where he lived to visit a gay bar on 16th Street. As with the other men, roughly the same age and with the same casual approach to life, and like others, Roger was nowhere to be seen. So as with Miss Broussard, Goodlett's mother came to Vandergrift because she didn't want to wait for the police's obligatory legal period, which at this time was 30 days for a missing person before they would fully ramp up their investigation.
Vandergrift must have been a pretty well-known private eye in the area, huh?
Yeah, he had connections to law enforcement locally, and he had a good reputation.
Apparently, for the fact that these mothers went and sought him out, on their own, and were able to actually get in touch with him, it's pretty impressive.
Yep. Well, he was making his face be known everywhere. He was going to all these gay bars and talking to everyone he could talk to. So I'm sure the mothers got wind from some of her son's friends that this guy was investigating.
Okay, maybe I'm picturing him wrong. I'm picturing him as this like old retired police detective that doesn't really want to be bothered, but he's just still needed in society. So these mothers just keep knocking on his door, and he's like, "All right, I'll help you this one."
In a way,
time.
yes, but I think the only thing I would say is inaccurate is that he didn't want to be bothered. I think he was very concerned and interested in solving this.
That makes way more sense. Maybe even advertising his private investigator services.
Yeah.
Okay.
For sure.
Okay.
So as Goodlett's mother, Roger Allen Goodlett, came to Virgil, not wanting to wait for that obligatory 30 days, she wept and told Virgil about Roger, his childhood demeanor, his trusting nature, his tendency to drink too much, the whole litany of factors that made Roger vulnerable out there on the streets.
Yeah.
The quote, the fates of these young men were too close to ignore, said Virgil. So Virgil and his investigator, Bill Hisley, scoured the gay bars in town and learned that Goodlett had left Our Place, a local gay bar, with another man whose description remained vague, in a light blue car with an Ohio license plate. Now, we mentioned that Herb would drive different vehicles.
Yeah.
Who knows where he got some? Maybe he had access to vehicles because of his job at the Bureau of Motor Vehicles, or who knows? But maybe he was stealing them.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, but it seemed as though he drove different vehicles oftentimes.
Yeah, it did.
He also had some classic cars in his garage as well that were noted by the surviving victim later.
Oh, really?
So maybe he was switching up vehicles that he actually owned and driving those just for these nights. He had like a couple of classic cars in his garage.
Right. And he did have a 5-car garage, so that's not that absurd to think that he had other vehicles. And you can get tags from anywhere. I mean, people be mentioning Ohio tags or Indiana tags or whatever.
Very true.
Yeah.
And I mean, he was very smart about disguising his identity. He would give fake names to people that he would talk to at the bars.
Oh, of course. Of course.
So unfortunately, Vandegrift found the police disinterested in the information that he was supplying to them that he had acquired. But the private detective was not discouraged. He knew that he was onto something important and had enough experience under his belt to comprehend the logic in a case like this. Then in August, only weeks after he entered the case, Virgil got a major break. A fellow named Tony Harris, which was not his actual real name. His name is disguised for his own protection.
Right.
But this fellow that we'll call Tony Harris came forward and said that he had known Roger Goodlett from the gay bar scene, and he had seen Virgil Vandegrift's posters and had some information to share. His story is pretty crazy.
Oh, yeah, it is.
We get firsthand knowledge of what it was like to spend a night with Herbert Baumeister.
Right.
He claimed that he had spent an evening with a man whom he was sure was a serial killer. And when he tried to tell the local police, they treated him like he was crazy. We talked so many times about, the police in the 80s, 90s,
Yeah.
and 70s, 60s,
Here we are
gay
again.
men that come forward,
Yeah.
victims. Yeah, I mean,
The cops are just
We know that.
uncomfortable investigating it. And they were at
Yeah.
the time. They were just uncomfortable investigating it. There's really no other way around it.
yeah. So he had tried to tell the police. They treated him like he was crazy. The FBI suggested that he had been on a drug trip.
Oh, Lord.
Then phoning Roger's mother, she put him in touch with Detective Vandegrift. So here he was to tell his story to Virgil Vandegrift.
Yeah.
And over the next several weeks, he made several visits to Vandegrift's office, each one yielding more information about that night as he remembered it. His interviews were recorded with his permission, and according to Tony, he had chanced upon his suspect in a local gay bar in town, the 501 Club, and had actually seen him at other gay bars before in the past. He said that the man was tall, lanky, and silent, but they had never spoken until this particular August evening. And what had drawn Tony's attention to him was the man was seemingly staring and scrutinizing the Roger Goodell missing persons poster behind the bar at the gay bar that they were at.
Yeah.
So this man was a bit infatuated by the poster, and it made Tony said, quote, "I had just had a feeling by the way he was captivated by that poster that he was the man who had killed my friend Roger. Something in his eyes."
Now, that's a bit of a jump.
Well, also,
It's a bit of a
people
jump.
that met Herb said that he gave them a weird feeling that he was something off about him. I mean, clearly there
Right.
was, but people have a good, a lot of people have a good spidey sense for this type of thing, and like
Absolutely.
apparently, yeah.
But it's just
Apparently, Tony was one of those people that was intuitive and could just sense that something was not right with this guy.
Right. And he's in his hunting grounds, so Herb is going to be acting
Yeah.
strange in these areas. Yeah.
Yeah. So Tony, suspecting the stranger of Roger's disappearance, introduced himself to the man in hopes to find out what he might know. The man called himself at this time, who we know this was Herb, but he called himself Brian Smart, and evaded Tony's subtle inquiries about Roger, but nonetheless invited Tony out for the night. He explained that he was a landscaper from Ohio, currently living in an empty house outside of town that was preparing for the new owners yet to move in. So he's claiming that he has access to this large property, and he's able to stay there. And if he wanted to come over, he invited Tony over for a cocktail and a swim. Tony reluctantly agreed, still, curiosity getting the better of him, wanting to know the truth about what happened to his friend,
Right.
and hoping that this is going to get answers. So outside, they got into Brian's gray Buick with an Ohio license plate. So once again, different vehicle,
There you go.
an Ohio license plate. They headed north on Meridian Street, where it turned into the US 131, I-31, leaving downtown behind them as greener suburbs emerged. Tony said they headed into, quote, rich people territory. And he remembered that there was a sign that said something farm. That's all he could make out on this. He couldn't remember, the Fox Hollow farm part, but he remembered a sign with the word farm on it, which would later come in handy in helping to capture him. So the Buick, when they arrived, paused before what was a large Tudor country mansion. He said they entered a dark house. The house was very dark. There was clearly no one there. They entered through a side entrance, and this is where he mentioned seeing several cars in the garage, like classic cars. He followed the man who called himself Brian through a succession of rooms until they came to a descending stairwell. "Come on," Brian motioned down. "There's electricity in the basement." He led him into a large recreation room at the bottom of the steps with an indoor pool. And this room, with its wet bar and connecting indoor pool, might have been pleasant were it not for the array of clutter, which I kind of mentioned earlier. There was also, bizarrely, mannequins set up all over the room. They were basically like there was a party of mannequins.
This may be one of the weirdest things about her.
It's such a
What
weird
the
image,
fuck?
isn't it? It's horror movie scene-esque, you know? Like,
But you
you're
know
going
what?
back with this monster, and then he's got this party of mannequins that he got from his department
I
stores.
was
These
about
came
to
from
say.
the Save-A-Lot
I was about to
stores.
say his department stores probably gave him a lot of resources for these mannequins, and when they broke or whatever, he just brought them home, or maybe some he liked.
Yeah.
I mean, he was obsessed with necrophilia, so human figures that don't move probably excited him a little bit. I don't know.
Yeah, so the sight of the mannequins around the room, staged in various poses, shot a chill through Tony. And, the man called himself Brian. Herb said, quote, "I get lonely down here. They give me company." And so they moved past that, and Tony would begin to swim in the indoor pool. And the man talked to him about a number of subjects. Eventually, however, his expression changed. Quote, "I just learned this really neat trick," he whispered, gathering up a hose that laid on the edge of the pool. Quote, "If you choke someone while you're having sex, it feels really great. You get a great rush." Quote, "You just want to pinch these two veins," he continued, indicating the carotid arteries around in his own neck. "And it's such a great buzz. You should see how someone looks when you're doing it to them. Their lips change color. That's how you can tell it's really working."
Okay.
Quite a segue into that. I don't know how
Yeah.
you go from normal conversation into that one.
Yeah. I don't think he cared. I think he was tired of waiting
No.
at this point. As we see with a lot of these guys, they don't waste much time. Once they get you by yourself, it's business.
A little bit of John Wayne Gacy to this one. Like, I could show you this really neat trick. Remember
Yeah.
the handcuff trick?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Or the rope trick, and before you know it, it's around your neck.
So listening to the man carry on about his asphyxiation fetish convinced Tony that Brian had murdered Roger. I mean, he knew the guy as Brian, but obviously this is Herb under an alias. And he thought, who knows how many more he's done this to. Quote, "Do it to me," Brian said. He stripped down and lay on the fold-out couch in the corner of the room and directed Tony to slip the hose over his throat. As he did so, he masturbated. It was clear that Brian had been through this routine many times. Tony placed Brian's hands around his neck and lay down. Bending over Tony, Brian tied the choker around his throat, and as the blood pressure mounted in his head, Tony didn't wait for further results. He feigned unconsciousness. And when Tony opened his eyes and grinned, Brian raged, quote, "You scared the shit out of me. You know you can die doing this. There have been accidents." With that, Tony decided to be frank. "Is that what happened to Roger Goodlett? Was he one of your accidents? Were there others?" So he's just at the point where he's like, "Fuck this. I'm confronting him about this. I know he's the one who killed my friend."
This encounter gets so odd from here, though.
Yeah. And at this point, Herb, who was going under Brian at the time, stared at him, not comprehending, lost in a daze of whatever, he'd also was messed up. Tony mentioned that at one point Herb had gone to another room and he thought did drugs, and Tony had been denying drinks from him. He was sober. So he had a sober recollection of this night. He may have had a drink or two at the bar before they came here.
Right.
But he had not taken anything, just knowing that it could be laced with something or whatever.
Right.
Very smart move on his part. But he knew that that this guy calling himself Brian was definitely messed up on some stuff. And now he just choked himself basically into unconsciousness briefly. So he was really out of it.
Yeah.
Eventually, Brian's speech slurred and he was overcome with sleep. This gave Tony a chance to look around the home. And at one point, he found he returned to the pool area where he found Brian's pants laying on the ground and tried to dig through his pants to get to his wallet and see who was, he was convinced that he was using a fake name. However, before he was able to see his ID, Herb began making noise and he got scared and dropped the pants. Unfortunately, that could have broken the case right there. Had he gotten his ID and seen his real identity, he could have brought that directly to the police or to Virgil and solved this case.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, they would have to wait to find out the true identity of Herb Baumeister.
Some days can be a real struggle. The good news is I'm having a lot less of those since I found True Niagen. I actually love it. True Niagen helps fuel the cell's energy engines, maintains cellular metabolism, and even supports heart health in combination with a healthy lifestyle. With 13 published human clinical studies and backed by Nobel Prize winners, True Niagen is a supplement that's clinically proven to boost NAD levels, an essential coenzyme required for cellular energy and repair. Since taking True Niagen, I have more resiliency, and it helps my muscles recover. I just have more zest for life. Add more vitality to your life today with True Niagen. Right now, new customers can save 10% on their first purchase by going to TrueNiagen.com/creeper and use code CREEPER. That's TrueNiagen.com/creeper, code CREEPER, to save 10% on your first purchase. TrueNiagen.com/creeper, code, you guessed it, CREEPER.
What's up, creepers? Well, winter's upon us, and that means that many more days spent curled up on the couch, getting out of the cold, and enjoying our favorite shows. Luckily for you, our newest sponsor, Sundance Now, can help you with that. Sundance Now is an ad-free streaming service created by AMC Networks for people who appreciate riveting storytelling and fresh perspectives. If meaningful shows are your escape, then Sundance Now is definitely for you. Sundance Now offers the best true crime series, drama, and thrillers from all over the world. Their original series, Dead Places, One Lane Bridge, and The Trail in the Outback, the Lindy Chamberlain story, are sure to excite and entertain. So far, my favorite featured series on Sundance Now has been Too Close. Too Close is a 3-part miniseries about a dedicated forensic psychiatrist named Dr. Emma Robinson. She gets far too close to a patient who's committed a horrible crime. I love this series for the same reason we all love true crime. We want to know what made someone do the horrible thing that they did, and that's what Dr. Emma Robinson is trying to figure out, and she's getting far too close to this person in the meantime. It's riveting. I highly recommend it. And there's plenty more where that came from. I'm actually midway through something that spotted my eye on Sundance Now, Jonestown, The Terror in the Jungle, a 4-part series. You know I had to click on that, and it's phenomenal. I wish that we had this series available back when we did our Jonestown episode on Patreon. You can stream Sundance Now on all of your favorite devices for as low as $4.99 a month. Just download the app or watch online and discover exclusive shows from around the world instantly. Start streaming your next obsession. Try Sundance Now free for 30 days by going to sundancenow.com and use promo code CREEPER. That's sundancenow.com, code CREEPER, for 30 days of free streaming. sundancenow.com, code CREEPER. So it took some convincing, but Tony finally convinced Brian to drive him back to town, dressing, searching for his car keys. He then led Tony back to the Buick and drove him back to Indianapolis. He remembered this man saying, quote, "Hey, you're a good sport. You really know how to play." As the car rolled into town, he made Tony promise to meet him at the 501 Club the following Wednesday, where they never did meet again following that, but until later when they do finally. But it appeared as though this kind of spooked this man away from Tony for a while because of his incessant questioning about his friend that had been killed.
And he knows that he blacked out for a little while Tony was at his house. He's not he's not stupid. He realizes that. He's like, there's no telling what this guy found out about me while I was asleep.
Yeah.
So
Tony told Virgil that he wasn't very clear where Brian's house was actually located, but it seemed to be in either Westfield or Carmel. Both are exclusive suburbs in the Hamilton County. And by the directions given, Vandegrift knew the place was outside of Marion County, in which Indianapolis sits. The trouble was that the vague description of the house, as stated by Tony, could fit almost any one of hundreds of estates in that area, and all he had to go on was a sign that was posted near the driveway that read "Something Farms," which it's not out of the realm to even think that maybe a few of these hundreds of houses out in this area might have a sign that says "Something Farms" on it. They're large properties.
Not to say that probably didn't help at all.
Yeah. It ultimately helps a little bit
to
tie some things together.
Oh, no doubt. I'm surprised he didn't take a better look at that sign on the way out. Or maybe it was dark, when Herb took him back
when
into
all
town.
of this was happening so fast as well. So Vandegrift drew anxious as the appointed Wednesday neared for Tony and Brian's rendezvous. He posted one of his men, Steve Rivers, outside of the bar while Tony loitered inside because Tony had spotted several cars in the man's garage, as we mentioned.
Yeah.
So it could have been any one of those cars that would come. They studied the faces of any automobile that seemed to cruise by, but no one fit Brian's description. Brown-haired, long-faced, pale. And by the time the bar closed that evening, it became apparent, much to Vandegrift's disappointment, that Tony Harris had been stood up. So the man was kind of nervous, didn't show back up the following Wednesday.
Right.
Realizing that he had uncovered a much larger case than a missing person, Vandegrift notified the Indianapolis Police Department. Yet again, Virgil took Tony Harris and his information to the one person in the department that they believed might actually see the value in his story. which was Detective Mary Wilson, who Vandegrift knew was already working on a number of other missing persons cases. We mentioned her briefly earlier. And in fact, she had been the principal investigator in the Jeff Jones disappearance, the case that Vandegrift had read about in the Indiana Word and whose details matched so closely with those of the missing persons reports for Roger Goodlett and Alan Broussard. Mary, as it turned out, was investigated disappearances of other Indianapolis men, too. Those of 20-year-old Richard Hamilton, 21-year-old Johnny Bayer, 28-year-old Alan Livingstone, and others dating back to the early 1990s. They were all gay men. Mary recognized Tony Harris as perhaps the missing piece to solving the puzzle. So this is what Virgil was hoping for. They found someone within the police department that actually believes them,
right?
And believes, more importantly, Tony Harris's story.
And you have a firsthand experience, which so
Yes.
often solves these crimes and gets
Seriously,
these,
a lot of serial killers we've covered get taken down by someone who survived,
that
right?
that one or two victims that survived and what they're able to remember. Yeah, it changes everything.
Yep. So he repeated his story to Mary. He then accompanied her on a prowl through the northern suburbs to try and find the home that he had that nightmarish night in. Pulling into the gate, into one gateway after another, none of them, the private manor, struck a familiar chord with him. And in the meantime, Mary designated plainclothes men in the field to the gay bars in town, the 501 Club, the Varsity, and Our Place, where they talked to bar owners and their frequenters for information that might identify the monster. Meanwhile, Vandegrift dispatched one of his investigators, Bill Hisley, to search the country suburbs. Bill had been a beat cop, I believe, and knew these suburbs well, so he assigned him to that task.
Okay.
And his quest would ultimately bring him to a property sign at the end of a long driveway in Westfield marked Fox Hollow Farms. And Bill Hisley was aware of Tony's statement about seeing a sign outside of Brian's house that read Farms or something along those lines.
Right.
And thought he would investigate. So this estate that he'd come upon greatly resembled Tony's description as well. Large, run down, and morbid. We mentioned how it was unkempt, as the Baumeisters lived there, it just got worse and worse.
Right.
So it kind of stuck out in a neighborhood that had everything so well kept. It belonged, he found out, to a family named the Baumeisters. And Vandegrift ordered aerial shots made of the property. And when he showed the photos to Tony, Tony unfortunately looked at him for a moment before saying, quote, "No, I don't think so. The driveway is too short from what I remember it to be." So unfortunately, that they didn't move further right away.
I just thought, man, this is just such an odd thing to say and to rule out this property. But you got to think when you are tense and you're nervous and you're riding to this property with this man for the first time by yourself, it probably did seem like a forever drive to get there.
Yeah, and it was dark.
It was
and
dark.
An aerial shot from actually being there is totally different.
Yeah, exactly.
The dimensions and the perspective is totally different.
Oh, absolutely.
So Herb continued to live his facade. His marriage to Julie continued on its surface to be normal. However, things were they were falling apart at the seams over time. Their marriage was sexless and passionless. And by the end of 1994, the Save-A-Lots had taken a plunge as well. Shoppers declined, bills soared. And it seems as though, that came directly back to Herb, who just was not managing them properly.
He just wasn't maintaining the store.
He was too busy doing other things.
Well, if your house is and your property is falling apart, I'm sure your store is as well.
Oh, they were.
Yeah.
We have a quote about that in a minute from one of the employees of Save-A-Lot at the time.
Huh.
But Julie, his wife, tired of the bickering, threatened divorce. She did not act initially, however. Instead, she sat by and watched her business decline, her marriage sour, and her husband grow stranger. At the workplace, Herb's ever-darkening moods were venting on his employees. He demanded grueling work and unfair attention from them. He fired those who wouldn't comply to his unjust treatment. Yet his own workday behavior was a farce. He would say, his employees say that he would disappear for hours, then return reeking of alcohol and barking orders at them with his whiskey breath. Here's a quote from one of the employees at the time. The once tidy stores had become filthy. They said, everything was so dirty. Everywhere you looked, there were mountains of garbage bags. It was like working in a garbage heap.
Ugh.
So I wonder why they started to, those stores weren't performing very well.
Right.
When you're walking through the store and there's just garbage everywhere.
And when you run a thrift store, you're already kind of on that verge. Like everything is different and unorganized. It doesn't look neat because you don't have multiples of certain things on a shelf or whatever. So when it starts to get dirty even a little bit, it's very discouraging to shop there and to look around. No wonder the money started to decline from these stores.
Yeah. So it had been almost a year since Virgil Vandergriff and Mary Wilson had begun their search for the man named Brian Smart. His real identity and house of mannequins remained a mystery. The hard lead that Vandergriff and Wilson wanted finally did come to fruition, though. Assuming the situation had cooled enough for his reappearance in the gay bar scene, Herb Baumeister decided to stop in at the Varsity Lounge on the evening of August 29th, 1995. And as it were, Tony Harris was present at the bar, who had given up hope for ever seeing Brian Smart again. He refrained from jumping out of his shoes with excitement when he saw him. He chatted with Baumeister nonchalantly and then, at the evening's end, managed to record his license plate number of the pickup truck in which Baumeister was driving that night. The plate number 75237A belonged not to anyone named Brian Smart, but to a Herbert Baumeister of Westfield, Indiana.
He happened to be driving
He
his
lived
own
in an
vehicle.
estate. Yep. Probably one of the ones from his garage.
Yep.
A classic pickup or something.
Yep.
They learned that he lived in an estate called Fox Hollow Farms and had a wife and children. They knew right then. They knew. The second they looked up his address, they're like, holy shit, we got him. And then the one officer was like, I fucking knew it.
Yeah, I know, right?
Was named Bill that had already been to the house. And like,
I told you guys months ago.
Yeah. It probably costed some lives because you guys didn't believe me.
True.
So the house, they learned, boasted a swimming pool in the basement as well, and that must have just clicked as well. Like, there's an indoor pool.
Yeah, there's a lot of big properties out there, but how many of them have a swimming pool in the basement? And then the basement full of mannequins, which they later find out too. And then that's just like a nail in the coffin.
Oh, yeah. So now the police were closing in on Herb, and he was unraveling at this time. Mary and her boss, Lieutenant Thomas Green, approached Baumeister at Washington Street at his store, one of his Save-A-Lot stores, on November 1st after surveying his actions for a bit. Without pretense, Mary told him straight up why they were there. They were investigating the disappearance of several young men in the Indianapolis community and that he was a suspect, and they wanted to search his home. He refused, telling them that further communication must be channeled through his lawyer. In the car afterwards, Green told Mary that he thought Herb was not only nervous beyond belief, but one of the weirdest guys I ever saw. So that kind of goes back to what I mentioned earlier about, just being around the guy, you got weird vibes.
Yeah.
So not to be outdone by Herb's refusal, Mary decided to try a different angle. She approached his wife, Julie Baumeister, who, as co-owner of Fox Hollow, could legally authorize a ground search of the property. The detective found Julie just as stubborn, however, as Herb had been. Evidently, Herb had told Julie that that he was being falsely accused of theft, and if approached, do not, under any circumstances, allow the police to conduct a search. But when Mary confided with Julie the real reason for her request, she was stunned. Quote, when she recovered enough to speak again, she informed Mary that they could not search her home. She was polite but still stunned, almost beyond words. Mary gave Julie her card and urged her to call if she changed her mind. So it goes from theft to no. There's a bunch of young missing men who we believe their remains might be at your property. That's quite a shock.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it is. But you have to think, as Julie, in this sense, you have to be like, that does add up.
Yeah, I was going to say, some of these red flags over the years of being with this man that, we've only had sex a handful of times over 20 plus years.
Yeah, he's had plenty of time.
His odd behavior.
Yeah, and he's had plenty of time to do this. He's been at the property at home by himself.
She's had to have seen the mannequins displayed all over the pool area. Yeah. She has to wonder what he's doing when the family's away for, weekends all the time and he's at home.
Exactly. All this stuff is starting to click in her head.
Or maybe, maybe it comes back around the human skull that her son had on a stick and brought to the house from the woods surrounding the property 2 years prior. Maybe that came back around in her mind.
Oh, yeah. She's going through all that. She's having all those flashbacks at this point.
That had actually happened.
Yeah.
Their son had been playing in the woods with a friend, and they brought back a human skull on a stick. and were actually using the stick to put the skull up in their sister's room in the window to scare her.
Yeah.
And when the mother found out, she made the son like take her out to the woods where she found the remains of a human out there, the skeleton of it, and somehow didn't go to the police.
Well, Herb said that it was just a research, the remnants of a research skeleton or something like that. He said it was some bullshit excuse. It's like, why would that be out here, Herb? We're not even.
It was
in
a
the
dissecting skeleton, right?
Yeah. Why are you? Who's dissecting skeletons out in our property? A private
human
property?
skeletons. Yeah.
Yeah. That doesn't make any sense at all.
Yeah.
But
so that had to have kind of gone through her mind when the detective asked her about this.
Right. You also have to understand she probably feels a sense of embarrassment living with this man who's been living like this, and she had no idea for this long, or she was in denial. Imagine how that must look to her, because on the outside she seems like a very successful, together member of society, and on the inside her whole family is falling apart right under her nose.
Yeah.
It's kind of embarrassing,
and it's gotta hurt knowing that she's wasted 25 years of her life with this person.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So after this, things soured more and more at the Baumeister residence. Julie even phoned Mary Wilson one morning to blame her for causing her domestic life to worsen. Quote, "The police are not coming to my house," she screamed, "tearing through my things, upsetting my children, all on the word of a psycho named Tony Harris, whom my husband has never heard of." So denial. I think she's in denial at this point.
Exactly.
And lashing out in anger over it. It wouldn't be until June of 1996, 6 months, as Vandergrift states, that Julie came to her senses. Over that time, her husband had become a paranoid wreck. When the Children's Bureau decided to cancel its contract with the two failing Save-A-Lot stores in May, he seemed to go off the deep end. Home life worsened for the woman, and it was now intolerable. Both she and Herb had initiated separate divorce proceedings, and her mind continued through it all to replay the doubts about Herb's sanity that Mary had force-fed her into her consciousness.
Right. How could you not
suddenly
be going through that stuff?
Right. Suddenly, she realized that she felt no loyalty to the thing that had been her husband. And on June 23rd, she called her lawyer, Bill Windling, and told him to get in touch with Mary Wilson. Herb was currently out of town with their son, Eric, visiting his mother at Lake Wassee, and she wanted to take this opportunity to tell Mary about the bones she had found in her backyard. And this goes back to that story I just mentioned a minute ago.
Yeah.
The following day, after Julie's lawyer was notified, Mary Wilson drove anxiously to Fox Hollow Farms. Accompanying her were two Hamilton County officials, Captain Tom Anderson of the County Sheriff's Office and Detective Jeff Markham. So Julie Baumeister, with attorney Wendling at her side, met the law enforcement people at her front door that afternoon and led them through the house to the wooded backyard. There, she pointed to the spot where 2 years earlier her son Eric had found a skeleton. The reason she had not notified authorities until now, she claimed, was because she had believed Herb's story about the bones being no more than a dissecting skeleton. His recent erratic actions, however, filled her with new doubts. You think?
Y'all think? Yeah. She's definitely being terrified now. She's probably thinking, what else has been back there? Because they could have found other skeletons and other remnants. Surely the children have.
Do you think over, these prior weeks, she had maybe gone out there herself and looked around a little bit more and found some more quote-unquote dissecting skeletons?
Definitely.
And thought to herself, how many do you need, Herb? How many dissecting skeletons do you need in the woods?
Right. I mean,
I know you're weird and you like mannequins, but starting to question your theory here.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it wasn't implied that he was the one dissecting the skeletons, was it?
Maybe he was saying that, somebody else had done that and left it out there, that it wasn't a real human skeleton or something, or it was, but it was used for scientific purposes or something. Who knows?
It's so, what's funny?
But I feel like she's had her head in the sand for a long time,
Oh, definitely. Definitely. She's just been staying busy. She has plenty to keep her busy, I'm sure. It's one of those instances. Yeah. But what's funny? As much as we've referenced bodies and skeletons and mannequins in this episode, they haven't been confused for each other for like the first time ever in true crime. Usually when you're talking bodies and mannequins, it's usually because they're getting confused one for the other or vice versa. So it's kind of funny that this story has both mannequins and bodies and remains, but neither
at the same property.
At the same property.
Neither of them confused with the other.
No. It's very clear what's mannequins and what's bodies, but it's just weird, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's just a strange occurrence.
So as the detectives looked around the yard, it appeared at first glance to be normal, but as they began to kick through the low grass and patches of dirt just beyond the back patio, they encountered a bone about a foot long, charred from being burned. They weren't sure if it was human. Then, as their eyes focused on the area immediately around them, it became apparent that those many pebbles and rocks shown around the cover were not pebbles and rocks, but fragments of bone. Lawyer Bill Wendling watched the police scoop up one chipped bone after another, now looked around at his feet like evidence to follow the old adage, so obvious it's unclear. He realized the chill that he was standing on what resembled bone chips. So that's insane. Like they finally like their eyes focus and they zoom out and they're like, these are not pebbles. These are all fragments of bone. Like
Yeah.
that realization.
Yeah. I'm sure it stuck out like a sore thumb once they realized what they were on.
Yeah.
Because out in the woods, there's nothing that's going to be as white as bone. But then again, this
Right.
bone was charred. A lot of it was charred, so it could have had burnt, brown, black edges. So it could have blended
Charred
in a
and
little
had
bit
been
more.
there for a while, probably had some grass growing over it in some instances.
Right. Right.
The unkempt nature of the yard helped to disguise it as well, I'm sure.
Oh, yes. Definitely.
So at one point, he leaned over to pick up what was obviously a piece of human teeth. Pieces of bone were everywhere. Still, the county people on site were unconvinced that what they were gathering and taking photos were actually human. It must have been also denial. Like, there's
It's
no way this is
absolutely
all human
denial.
bone.
It's just because the sheer amount. They were shocked. The horrors. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I mean, it's just like, that
Right.
can't be a body too. That can't be more bone over there. Come on. Like this, there's got to be a simple explanation for this. Maybe this is like an old burial ground from a long time ago and this stuff has surfaced. I don't know. Your mind just doesn't go to the seemingly docile businessman who lives on this property has been killing people and throwing their remains back here.
See, the thing is, the two detectives that Mary brought with her, they had that mindset. She knew. She damn well knew they were human. And when she delivered the bags of evidence to forensic anthropologist Stephen Noraki at the University of Indiana for examination, his answer was fast coming. Quote, "They're human, they're recent, and they've been burned."
Well, there you go.
So there's your confirmation.
There you go.
And
No arguing with that.
And the full-scale search of the property was on. The next day, the police returned to the scene of what looked like one of the worst crimes Indiana had ever encountered. It began to appear now that Herb Baumeister's homemade graveyard might contain the remains of those many young homosexuals who over the years had vanished from the streets of Indianapolis. The anthropological team began the hunt by placing small orange flags on the ground wherever a bone fragment appeared, and in only a half an hour, they dropped nearly 100 such markers. Summing it up, Naraki exclaimed, quote, "It's a mass disaster scene." While the dig continued into the late hours, other policemen checked out the interior of the Baumeister home, finding the mannequins, the wet bar, the pool, just as Tony Harris had described it. However, they uncovered something that Tony had not seen in the evening of his encounter with Baumeister, a semi-hidden video camera that police immediately suspected had been used to videotape the strangulations of these young men.
Yeah, that definitely happened.
For sure.
But they never found the tapes. They never found the tapes.
Almost,
found the
unfortunately.
tapes. Yeah, we'll get to that.
We'll talk about that in a few minutes. So Julie grew anxious about the safety of her son, Eric, who was with his father at Lake Wawasee.
Wawasee.
Wawasee. We'll go with that.
Wawasee. Yeah.
People in Indiana are like, you fucking idiots.
You butchered it.
She feared the limits to which Herb might go out in to find out what was happening. So if he found out that this search was taking place at his home, what he might do with their son and to himself.
Yeah.
Prosecutor Learcamp and a county judge drew up custody papers to remove the boy from his father's presence. Efforts were made by Baumeister to hold on to his son, but came to no avail. He had no reason to suspect that his secret had been literally uncovered back at Fox Hollow Farms. And he figured this custody action was just a ploy by Julie to counteract his latest divorce movements. So luckily, he was still unaware of the search taking place at his property, or else who knows what he might have done with his son.
It's kind of fucked up that he only wanted to fight for his son, right? Didn't he have 3 kids?
Yeah.
It's kind of fucked up, and it's kind of weird, too, especially when you later find out that a lot of his victims were 20 years old, around 20 years old. You know, that's pretty damn young. Mm-hmm. And then he wants to hold on to his son in particular. That just doesn't rub me right.
Mm-hmm. I know, I agree.
That's creepy. I hope he never. I hope he never messed with that boy.
Me too. But it makes you wonder, knowing the monster that he was, and the fact that he's on a trip with just his son to this lakefront property. You're like, what was going on? You know?
Yeah. I don't think that was a good situation.
So when the police showed up with the proper papers to escort the child home, Herb released him calmly without menace. The police determined also that the timelines of the victims' disappearances coincided with the periods that Herb's family were away. So it's all falling into place. They know now what has been going on for all these years.
Yep.
While his family's away, he's been taking these young men back to this mansion where he kills them and throws their remains out into the woods.
Yep.
Meanwhile, the excavations of the backyard went on without pause. The number of diggers had grown to about 60 volunteers, mostly off-duty policemen and firemen. And in the first couple days, the search had produced an amazing 5,500 bones, teeth, and bone fragments, which, according to Nawrocki, made up about 4 bodies. That's insane.
Yeah, it is.
That you could have that many pieces of bones from 4 bodies. And after they had combed over the entire 18 acres of the Baumeister's property, members of the team were soon learned that the search was far from over. Neighbors from an adjacent farm crossed into the police cordon to inform them that they had found evidence of more bones next door. They led investigators to an area cut through with drainage ditch that separated the 2 properties. Here in this ditch were so many human ribs, vertebrae, and spines that one of the officials murmured, "Jesus Christ, they're everywhere." Oh. The bones were so numerous and more intact than on the Baumeister land that they actually stuck up visibly from the mud. Shovels drew in not more bones, but with them cans of Miller Genuine Draft Beer, which was Herb's favorite beer, so just tying himself more to this.
Yep.
And handcuffs that had probably bound the victims.
Wow. He didn't really go to very great extents to hide these bodies, did he?
No, only the ones that were really close to his home, like, 20 feet away from the home. But the ones that were a little further out, they're like, oh, they won't bother. He must have thought, oh, they won't bother to go,
I wonder,
on the property line of me and my neighbor here. I'll just throw the entire rib cages over here.
Well,
no one will find those.
Did we ever find out where he was burning these bodies? Is it just a fire pit on the property? Was that searched? Was it a wood stove or what the hell?
Do not know. Yeah, it could have been a fireplace in the house, or it could have been barrels in the backyard. Who knows?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like there's a bunch more evidence somewhere wherever he's burning these bodies, unless he's throwing them in the woods and lighting them on fire right there in the woods. Which I feel like that's asking to get caught. I just don't feel like, neighboring, your neighbors that, like the neighbor that shared the ditch on the other side. Like if you're starting a fire in that ditch once a month or some shit, I just don't think you get away with that. I think they're gonna be like, why are you starting fires in the woods? It's about the dumbest thing you can do. But
yeah, I mean, he very easily could have been doing it in the fireplace,
yeah,
little bits at a time, and then crushing them up and throwing them out in the yard, which is also dumb. Like, put them in a fucking trash can, take them to the dump, something. Who knows? But
right, he never thought he was going to get caught, man. That's obvious.
No,
as most of these guys.
He was living very bold.
Yeah.
And honestly, who knows how long it would have taken if it weren't for Tony? Like, may have never been caught, to be honest.
Yeah, I'm so surprised he didn't kill Tony. Aren't you?
Yeah,
I really am. I mean, he had every opportunity. Maybe he really liked Tony.
But no, I think he was smart enough to know that Tony would have fought him and probably would have won. Like Tony was, his demeanor, he probably realized he never should have taken Tony back to his house, because Tony was suspicious of him from the time that he approached him. The whole concept of approaching him was based around the way he was looking at that flyer. So Tony was not going to get taken advantage of. He was not going to let him put that rope around his neck, and Herb must have known that. He must have sensed that.
But he did let him choke him, though.
No, he let Tony choke him, but Tony never let Herb choke him.
Yeah,
they didn't.
Yeah, he choked Herb Herb choked Tony for a little bit. Remember, then Tony faked it, and then Herb got mad at him. He faked feigning asleep.
Oh my gosh, I forgot about that part.
Yeah,
and he freaked him out when he came to.
Yeah, I bet he did, because he probably thought he was unconscious and Herb was about to finish the fucking job. That's probably what happened. And it genuinely scared him. That's what upset him, because, oh shit. He's like, oh, you're not unconscious. Well, my plan's ruined, and you're not intoxicated. So,
there might have been a drugging element to most of these, where like the Randy Kraft thing, where he wasn't powerful enough to strangle these men if they were going to fight back.
Exactly.
So he would drug them, trick them into putting the rope around for sexual pleasure, and then just continue to choke them beyond the point of coming back.
Exactly. I think old Herb couldn't do it if they were sober, which Tony was sober, and he made sure of that. Saved his life.
So by the time that the exhumation ended, they had found about 140 bones that were estimated as belonging to another 7 men on top of the other 4 that they had accumulated, bringing the count up to 11 found on the property. and it would be September before the anthropologists were able to identify some of the bodies. Disappointingly, only 8 of the 11, and each of these gathered from dental records.
Yeah.
There was 4 initially that they were able to, but over the years, it's obviously been a long time. There's been 4 more that have been identified.
Well,
so
yeah, I found out that the 7 that were identified later were because in a different area they found 7 left thumb bones. Ain't that weird? They found 7 left thumb
human
bones.
body only has 1 left thumb bone, so that's
Exactly.
7 people right there.
Exactly, but it's just odd that they were able to find all of those thumb bones, untouched. You would think the hands and the head would be the number one things that a serial killer would try to destroy. Mm-hmm. It's funny that he left 7 thumb bones intact to be identified. But
Yeah.
that's just some.
But
fun
like we
little
said,
info
he
there.
wasn't planning on getting caught, so didn't really matter.
Of course, they're never planning on getting caught.
Yeah. So the 8 that would ultimately be identified would be Roger Allen Goodlett, which we knew, 33 years old.
Yeah.
Manuel Resendez, who was 31. Stephen Hale, who was 26. Richard Hamilton, who was 20. Johnny Bayer, who was 20. Alan Broussard, who was 28. Jeff Jones, who was 31. And Michael Kieran, who was 46. And that was 8 of the 11 sets of remains that were found.
Yeah.
But where was Herb at this point? The only clue police had came from Brad Baumeister, Herb's brother, who had called Detective Wiseman on June 29th, 5 days after the police found the graveyard behind the house. Brad told the policeman that his brother had phoned him from the little Michigan town of Fenville, saying that he was on a business trip and needed more money quickly. And after Brad sent him some cash, he became aware of the goings-ons at Fox Hollow Farms and notified authorities immediately. So Herb knows at this point that the jig's up, that his farm's been dug up, that all the bodies have been found, and he's on the run.
Yep.
As best can be determined, Herb, in his 1989 gray Buick, left Wawasee, where his mother's condo was, and headed north, arriving at Fenville around the 28th of June. The next day, he reached Port Huron, where he phoned again Brad, asking for more money, and Brad told him that he should call the police, that they wanted to speak with him.
Herb's like, nah.
Yeah, I'm good. At this
think I'm gonna
point,
go to
he headed
Canada.
north. Yeah, he headed north and fled to Canada. Quote, Ontario Provincial Police told the Indianapolis Star they believed Herb arrived in Sarnia on June 30th, spending several days there before driving east along Lake Huron shoreline to Grand Bend, Ontario. There at Pinnery Park on the evening of July 3rd, Herb put a .357 Magnum revolver barrel to his forehead and pulled the trigger, ending his life before he could be captured. So there's no trial. There's no, we don't get any more details.
Yeah, no
The note he
justice.
left behind he did leave a 3-page note behind attributing his decision to a failing business and an irreparable marriage, but there was no mention of the many skeletons on his property. So he didn't want to talk about the whole serial killer part of his life.
Oh,
just
no.
his failed marriage and business. That's the important thing.
Yeah, I'm sure that's what
Me,
drove
me,
him
me.
to it, even though it's been failing for years.
Yeah. In his final words on a 3-page suicide document, he explained that he would now eat a peanut butter sandwich, his favorite snack, and then go to sleep.
Wow.
The evening before he died, a Canadian trooper had stopped him to ask why he was sleeping in his car under a nearby bridge. He told her that he was merely a tourist passing through and he was grabbing a moment's rest. At the time, she noted that there was some luggage and what looked to be a pile of videotapes in his back seat.
Oh, no.
Quote, those very well may have been the murder tapes.
They were. There's no doubt you ride around with a bunch of videotapes for no reason.
Yeah. Virgil Vandegrift says, quote, were these the videotapes of the murders he committed in the pool at Fox Hollow Farms? We will never know, for after he died, there were no signs of the tapes on him nor in his car. He must have tossed them in a lake before he shot himself. And then adds, perhaps it's for the best.
Perhaps.
Yeah, I mean, we
Imagine-
know what he did. What good does it do to have the video evidence of it?
I was about to say, imagine being his children and watching those tapes,
Yeah.
or finding them in the future.
Those
or-
don't really need to be out there.
Oh.
I mean, they're not going to add any value. Like the victims'
I was
families.
about to say, they're just going to hurt the victims' families and
Yeah.
the survivors of Herb. And yeah, that's just not a good idea.
Maybe it's best that there was no trial, that there was no tapes, because imagine if he had not killed himself and he went to trial and those tapes were found, they would have
Oh
been
my
showed to
God.
the jury and the family members may have seen those videos.
And then all those
And
people are
haunted them
scarred
forever.
Yep. Scarred forever. Yep.
So later on, Herb would be connected to the I-70 Strangler murders, and it appears as though he's the strongest suspect in those. And honestly, in my opinion, he is responsible for most of them. The I-70 Strangler killed 12 men in Indiana and Ohio between June 1980 and October 1991, dumping their bodies near the Interstate 70. Larry Eiler is also a possible suspect.
Yeah.
We've obviously covered him before.
Right.
All of these victims were young boys and adolescents who met in popular gay bars and in similar establishments within a 4-block radius of Indianapolis. All of the victims were later found naked or partially clothed near the I-70, dumped in rivers, streams, and ditches in the rural countryside. Each had been strangled to death, which fits, obviously, Herb's modus operandi. Early in the investigations, Vandegrift had made connections between the disappearances of gay men in Indianapolis and the I-70 Strangler. In sharing Tony Harris's testimony with David Lindoff, a prosecutor from Pebble County, Ohio, who was heading to the investigation of what was called the I-70 murders, the two men agreed that there were tight similarities between the murders that were going on that Herb was responsible for and these I-70 killings. The last known I-70 murder had been committed in 1990, not long before the Indianapolis disappearances began. So this might have been, not long after Herb gets Fox Hollow Farms and begins to start dumping his bodies there.
That's what I thought
fits
as
the
well.
timeline.
It fits perfect. Yeah.
Yep.
It's just too coincidental. The fact that bodies stop showing up along I-70 right after Herb gets his property. That's damning.
When the newspapers began splashing the news of bodies unearthed at Fox Hollow Farms, Lindoff remembered the conversations he had with Vandegrift. Now having a suspect, Lindoff discovered that Herb Baumeister had made countless business trips to Ohio during the late 1980s. Already cold to the fact that her husband was indeed the maniac who strangled men in her home while she and her children were away, this new accusation did not surprise her. She cooperated with Lindoff, providing him with all the information he wanted: credit card receipts, phone call records, even the use of their car Herb had driven on those business trips. Baumeister's photo matched the police sketch drawn from witnesses who they thought had seen the I-70 Strangler. One witness, in fact, even came forward to identify Herb's picture as the same man who had driven his friend from a bar home in the evening of 1988. His friend Michael Riley, who had been found dead the next morning and is one of the victims of the I-70 Strangler. Not long after that, representatives from combined Ohio and Indiana counties held a press conference to definitively link Herb Baumeister with the I-70 slayings. Quote, "There were skeptics," Vandegrift admits. "We'll never know for sure, of course, if he was indeed the same man. Everything points to him, even the fact that the roadside killings ended at the same time he bought his house and now had a place with plenty of room to dump the bodies with less hassle." Yep. And if he was already a successful serial killer dumping bodies off the side of the highway for years, of course he was bold and thinking, I can just dump them in my backyard and get away with it. I've been doing it for years, getting, people see me at these bars with these people, and then I throw them out the car on the side of the highway, and I've gotten away with it. It'll be even easier to throw them in my backyard. That's less bodies to be found for as long as I live here.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yep.
Just makes it easier.
So to wrap this case up, we'll quickly mention the names of the victims, the known victims of the I-70 killer. Michael Petrie, 15 years old. That goes back to that conversation we mentioned about him and his son. 15 years old.
Does.
If he did indeed kill this 15-year-old boy, that just tells you he's not opposed to doing this with young boys as well.
And there's many other teenagers on this list.
Yeah, there's a 14-year-old. So we got Maurice Taylor, 23 years old, Delvoid Lee Baker, 14, Michael Andrew Riley, 22, Eric Rotker, 17, Michael Glenn, 29, James Robbins, 21, Jean Paul Tabbitt, which has no age, Stephen Elliott, 26, Clay Boatman, 32, Thomas Clevenger, 19, and Otto Becker, 42. 42-year-old in there as well. So maybe just opportunistic, like whoever was willing to go with him. Didn't really matter to him age-wise.
Absolutely. Well, he was confirmed to kill one of his victims was 46, I believe, in the confirmed.
Yeah, that was found on Fox Hollow Farm.
Michael Kern. He was 46. So basically anywhere from 14 to 46 years old, if they were willing, he would take them.
Yep.
Yeah, I can't believe we took this long to cover this guy, man. But it's frustrating though. These killers that commit suicide at the end, they see no justice. They don't answer for anything that they did. And we've talked about this plenty of times. I guess it's nice that they had to end their life early, but it still doesn't feel right. It doesn't feel like justice was served.
Yeah,
it really doesn't.
Part of the trial process that is beautiful, a beautiful thing, is the family getting to stand up there at the end of the trial after they're found guilty and give their statements of what, how this fucker has, what they've done to their lives and their family. They do the grief that they've suffered because of their selfishness and their disgusting acts. Like, you wish they could have gotten to do that to really make him sit there and deal with that. Whether he would have cared or not, we talked about he's a sociopath, so who knows? He was living a double life for so long that maybe he could just separate that from reality.
Well, I'm sure he could, but that doesn't make it easier on his family. His wife, his kids, I'm sure would like to have answers.
Yeah.
Would like to have closure from him. And I mean, just as a child moving on with a father who committed something like this, you would just want to know that he at least loved you, I guess. I don't know. It's hard to put yourself in that situation. But I know it's got to be hard growing up with a parent who was this horrible of a person and not being able to get some type of answers or some type of reasoning as to why they turned out that way other than just genetics. You don't want to think that you're next. You know what I'm saying? And when this parent or this person, this family member takes their life, it just kind of leaves it all open. You don't get to talk to them, even if it's in prison. I just like to think that if I had a father or a grandfather that was accused of crimes this atrocious, I would need to talk to them. What made you feel this way? What changed? At what age did you start having these urges? I want to know all these things. And his family, his son, his daughters, they don't get any of that. They don't get any of that. They just have to wonder, am I going to end up being crazy like my dad?
He just added one more selfish act to his, many that he had committed over his life by taking his own life before he had to face justice.
Yeah.
So
absolutely. Another shit taking the easy way out.
Right.
But you know what? Don't
take
the easy
way out with your armpits.
No. Go the organic, the paraben and aluminum free way with Oh My Gaia. Oh My Gaia is an innovative, all-natural deodorant, fragrance, and beard oil company specializing in paraben and aluminum-free products. That's the key, guys. Their innovative line of deodorants inhibit the growth of odor-causing bacteria while maintaining effectiveness. At Oh My Gaia, they use only all-natural, paraben, and aluminum-free organic ingredients. And guys, there's tons of scents to choose from here at Oh My Gaia, whether you want your beard oil or your scented oil or your deodorant. There's tons of things to choose from to fit your fancy, from vanilla to cherry almond, sandalwood, lavender, lemongrass, Egyptian musk, which is what I'm wearing today, coconut, dreamsicle, leather, lumberjack, honeysuckle, fireside, bergamot, amber, barbershop, sweet pea, pear, sailor. And because you guys are True Crime Guys listeners, you can use the word creeper for 15% off your order. And if you don't know where to start, I forgot to mention we have our very own scent, True Crime Pine. I don't know how I forgot True Crime Pine. Got to have a jar of True Crime Pine sitting around, made just for your True Crime Guys.
You just saved the best for last. No big deal.
That's all I did. That's right. But because you guys are True Crime Guys listeners, like I said, 15% off your order with the code word CREEPER, CREEPER. At shop_ohmygaia on Instagram, or you can go to ohmygaia.com. That's OHMYGAIA.com. You guys won't regret it. Give it a shot.
Do it.
All right.
I want to
thank
thank
some new reviews.
Yeah, I want to thank the couple people that have taken the time to go and rate and review the show this week. I want to say thank you to No Likey yet again, who keeps leaving review after review. Good for you, working the system, getting shout outs every week. No Likey says loyal listener and Patreon binger. So since you're a patron member, I'll definitely still give you a shout out too. So yeah, thank you. And then we have Merg1994. Merg1994 says the best, 5 stars. The only thing my ex-boyfriend was good for was introducing me to this podcast. I've been a fan and avid listener for over 2 years now. Love you guys. That's great.
See? Sometimes your exes can leave you with good stuff.
Right. Love it.
Wow.
Well, also, if you want more of us, if you want more Patreon, if you want more True Crime Guys, check out our Patreon page, patreon.com/True Crime Guys. $2 a month gets you access to our once a month premium Patreon only episode, which we tend to do bigger name episodes, a lot of heavy hitter serial killers and all that stuff. There's I don't know how many recordings are on Patreon at this point. Probably a couple hundred.
Oh my God.
Between just the
At
banter,
least.
which we do every Friday at the $5 tier.
Yep.
You get to hear us just hang out for 30 minutes to an hour and answer listener questions and get to know us a little bit more.
This past Friday, we released episode 52, Just the Banter, a year's worth of Just the Banters.
Yep. And if you love merch from your favorite podcast, we have gold stickers available at the $5 tier, as well as getting access to all of our premium content.
That's right.
And at the $10 tier, you can hang out with us once a month. We get on Zoom and hang out with the creepers for 30 minutes and talk about whatever, anything. We get to know you guys. So yeah, that's all available on Patreon. $2 through $10 get you all that, and you can pay up front too. If you want to do the $2 tier, it's $21, and you have a full year, and you're done.
Yep. And it's $54 at the $5 tier, and then $108 at the $10 tier for a whole year worth of True Crime Guys Patreon content. And like we said, that gives you access to our 1 month exclusive episode, Just the Banter every week, and we get to have a Zoom call once a month as well. So if you're already a patron of True Crime Guys and you're all caught up on everything that True Crime Guys has to offer, we have other shows on our network now. Check out Strange and Unexplained wherever you listen. If you just search True Crime Guys in your podcast app or whatever, it should show up there. You'll see Strange and Unexplained. You'll see our orange and teal colors with our T-Rex skeleton there on the logo. And it's where we focus on unsolved, missing persons, and just strange phenomena, cult classics, but a lot of unsolved cases on there, which we don't typically touch on True Crime Guys. That just gives us another outlet to cover those cases on there. And it's a little bit different format than True Crime Guys. I come on, I host, I bring you the facts, I bring you my opinion at the end, and then you get to hear from Lorne, who studied completely separate from me, just like we do on True Crime Guys, and you get to hear his opinion and how he feels about the case, and then we kind of see if we agree or disagree, and it's kind of cool. You kind of get some extra perspectives on every single case. But again, that's Strange and Unexplained, wherever you listen. And don't forget about our fantasy football podcast. Right, Lorne?
That's right. Full House Fantasy Football Podcast, hosted by me and my buddy Tori. Every Thursday night, we get together after the Thursday night game and talk fantasy football. Our lineups in the upcoming week starts and sits.
Yep.
You name it. All things fantasy. And yeah, check that out. Full House Fantasy Football. It's available everywhere.
Right on, guys. And as always, there's links to everything that we have plugged right below the description right here. Click on True Crime Guys Linktree, and you guys will see links to our merch, our Spotify, different Patreon pages, and all of our other shows. All right?
Yep, and all of the sources from the cases that we just did. You can find the book that I used to study this case.
That's
the link
correct.
to that is in there, and then the different articles that I used as well.
Yep. It's all right there,
All right.
guys.
We'll see you guys next week. Keep creeping. Have a great week.
Keep creeping, guys.
True crime guys, in the desert we like a mirage. It's okay if you clicked on us cause you thought we was True Crime Garage. Now we ain't mad at you, sit down, let us talk at you. I'm talking to the creeper army, we out here making murder, get murder, get murder. True crime guys, in the desert we like a mirage. It's okay if you clicked on us cause you thought we was True Crime Garage. Now we ain't mad at you, sit down, let us talk at you. I'm talking to the creeper army, we out here making murder charming.